Imagine this. You are laced into a corset so tight, your ribs ache with every breath. 20 pounds of fabric pressed down on your body, layer after layer, chemise, petticoats, crinoline hoops stretching as wide as a dinner table. You glide into a glittering ballroom, chandeliers blazing above, nobles watching your every step. And then it happens. Nature calls urgently. Where do you go? How do you even move? Dozens of skirts block your legs, steel hoops trap your body like a cage, and the eyes of society demand that you remain elegant, silent, and utterly composed. Yet beneath the silks and lace lies the most human question of all. How on earth did Victorian women relieve themselves in those giant dresses? The truth is stranger than you might expect. Satirical cartoons of the 1,850 seconds joked that women could simply let go beneath their skirts, the fabric swallowing the evidence. Others whispered of portable contraptions, little brass funnels or porcelain flasks hidden under gowns so a woman could relieve herself standing up. And in the grand houses of London, ornate chairs doubled as commodes, where maids discreetly positioned chamber pots under layers of crinoline. But this isn't just about toilets. It's about silence. In the Victorian world, women were expected to appear pure, graceful, almost ethereal, yet they carried bodies as real and fragile as ours. To speak of those bodies was taboo. So when the urge struck in a ballroom, on a carriage ride, or during an endless church service, women endured in secrecy. The chamber pot became an invisible companion. Underwear was often split at the crotch, designed not for modesty but for practicality, so a lady could lower herself over a pot without lifting 20 pounds of skirts. And menstruation? That was an even deeper silence. Women used rags, moss, even sheep's wool, washed and reused in endless cycles. Diaries rarely spoke of it, but the exhaustion lingers between the lines. Pain, blood, and shame, all hidden beneath the image of elegance. This is the paradox of the Victorian age. A society obsessed with appearance, yet built on daily discomforts it refused to acknowledge. To laugh at the rumors is easy, but behind them lies a reality of quiet suffering, ingenious improvisation, and secrets passed from woman to woman in whispers. Tonight, we will peel back those layers of silk and steel. We will step beyond the portraits of serene queens and society ladies into the hidden world that history preferred to ignore. A world of chamber pots and fainting rooms, of secret inventions and whispered rumors. Because to understand the Victorians, we cannot only study their gowns and manners, we must also confront the simple, awkward, unavoidable question: how did they manage the most natural act of all? To understand why Victorian women endured such strange and secret struggles, we have to step back into their world. The year is 1851. London is buzzing with pride as the Crystal Palace opens for the Great Exhibition. Under its glass roof, the marvels of the industrial age are on display: steam engines, telegraphs, locomotives. It is the dawn of modern progress. And yet, when it came to sanitation, progress lagged centuries behind. Beneath the glitter of empire lay a city choking on its own waste. The River Thames stank so foul that in the summer of 1858, Parliament itself was brought to a standstill during the infamous Great Stink. Raw sewage flowed openly into the river. Streets reeked. Outbreaks of cholera swept through neighborhoods. And while reformers campaigned for modern sewers, most homes still relied on chamber pots, outhouses, or medieval-style garderobes, simple shafts that emptied straight into alleys below. For women, the challenge was doubled. Not only did they face a filthy environment, but they were also bound by a culture of silence and restraint. A Victorian lady was not supposed to sweat, belch, or even admit she had bodily needs. Etiquette. Manuals taught her how to walk, sit, and faint gracefully, but said nothing about how to relieve herself in public. Modesty demanded denial, And then there was fashion. Queen Victoria herself set the tone. Her court popularized the crinoline, a dome of whalebone or steel hoops introduced in the 1850 seconds. At its widest, a fashionable skirt could span 6 feet across, so wide that women knocked over lamps, caught fire in fireplaces, or were blown into fountains by sudden gusts of wind. Satirical papers joked about crinoline catastrophes, but behind the laughter lay a truth. The garments were heavy, awkward, and deeply impractical. Add to this the corset, laced so tightly it reshaped the ribcage, and multiple layers of chemise, drawers, petticoats, and overskirts. Dressing each morning could take an hour and the assistance of a maid. Once trapped inside such clothing, a woman's body was no longer entirely her own. To sit, to bend, even to breathe required effort. To use a toilet or a chamber pot was a logistical nightmare. Class made a difference, but not a solution. Wealthy women had access to private retiring rooms in theaters and mansions where maids could discreetly assist them. Ornate commode chairs were built into drawing rooms, disguised beneath velvet upholstery. But poor women, they had fewer layers of clothing, yes, but also fewer places to hide. For many, the only option was an alley, a backyard, or the fields beyond the city. Privacy was a privilege of class. This paradox, luxury and discomfort, wealth and silence, defined the Victorian experience. A lady was expected to embody purity and refinement, but every step she took reminded her of her body's limits. Behind every elegant portrait lies the weight of fabric, the smell of unwashed streets, and the quiet endurance of daily indignities. And yet, while society remained silent, imagination did not. If no one spoke openly about how women managed these challenges, rumors and jokes rushed to fill the void. Cartoons, gossip, and whispered stories painted pictures, both absurd and unsettling. Which brings us to the next chapter, the legends and rumors that surrounded Victorian women's hidden lives. Were they exaggerated caricatures, or did they contain a kernel of truth? When society refuses to speak openly, rumors bloom in the silence. And nowhere was this more true than in the Victorian era, where the clash between enormous dresses and ordinary bodily needs became fertile ground for satire, gossip, and whispered legends. Satirical magazines like Punch seized on the absurdity of the crinoline. Cartoons showed ladies squeezed sideways through doorways, lifted into the air by sudden gusts of wind, or more scandalously squatting directly over chamber pots, their hoops forming a private tent. These drawings were meant as jokes, but they also hinted at a question no one dared answer directly. How did women really manage? One rumor claimed that women, trapped inside steel hoops and multiple skirts, sometimes simply let go where they stood, trusting that layers of petticoats would conceal the evidence until later. The idea was shocking, even scandalous, but it spoke to real anxieties about fashion's impracticality. Whether or not it ever truly happened, the fact that Victorians laughed about it shows how much the problem haunted their imagination. Other whispers focused on secret devices. Travelers' journals from France and Britain mention the so-called urinettes, small funnel-shaped contraptions of brass, porcelain, or tin, designed to let women relieve themselves standing up. Some claimed these were carried discreetly in handbags or hidden beneath skirts. Whether common or rare, the existence of patents for such items proves that at least some inventors believed there was a market for them. Chamber pots, too, acquired their own mythology. According to gossip, grand banquets were punctuated by discreet retreats to side rooms, where maids held pots beneath their mistresses' skirts. Some even whispered of commode chairs hidden in salons, ornate furniture that allowed a woman to sit and relieve herself without ever disrobing. Though evidence of such practices is sparse, the persistence of the rumor shows how fascinated Victorians were with the collision of elegance and necessity. And then there were the darker tales. Foreign visitors, both amused and horrified, wrote letters describing English ladies' supposed habits, sometimes wildly exaggerated, sometimes laced with disdain. To them, the crinoline was less a fashion statement than a kind of prison, forcing women into humiliating improvisations. These travel accounts blurred fact with mockery, but they spread the idea that Victorian women lived constantly on the brink of indignity. Menstruation, too, was shrouded in secrecy and gossip filled the void. Some insisted women simply bled into layers of petticoats, while others whispered about primitive cloth, bandages held in place by strings, or early forms of drawers. Because diaries rarely mention the subject, speculation became its own narrative. The silence was not proof of absence, it was proof of taboo. The power of these rumors lies not in their accuracy, but in what they reveal. They show how Victorians used humor, gossip, and exaggeration to grapple with what polite society refused to name. To laugh at the image of a lady relieving herself in a ballroom was safer than admitting that even queens and duchesses faced the same needs as everyone else. But rumors, however entertaining, are only one side of the story. Behind the cartoons and caricatures, there are real objects, real patents, and real testimonies that give us firmer ground. To separate myth from reality, we must now turn from gossip to the evidence history has left behind. Rumors may spark laughter, but evidence offers us something firmer. If we want to understand how Victorian women truly managed their most basic needs, we must step away from the caricatures of Punch and into the quieter record of patents, diaries, artifacts, and reformers' reports. The first layer of truth comes from invention patents. Throughout the mid to late 19th century, inventors filed designs for female, portable conveniences. Surviving sketches show funnel-shaped devices made of tin or porcelain, sometimes marketed under delicate names like ladies' sanitary aid. These were not jokes. They were engineered solutions for a real problem. A woman could position the device under her skirts, relieve herself while standing or squatting discreetly, and then empty it later. Museums in both Britain and France preserve examples proof that at least some women carried these contraptions, whether during travel or long public events. Then there are the commode chairs. At first glance, they looked like ordinary furniture: an upholstered armchair, a wooden stool, even a dressing table. But beneath the cushion or lid sat a chamber pot hidden from view. For wealthier women, this allowed discreet relief in bedrooms, parlors, or retiring rooms. Servants were responsible for emptying and cleaning them, often several times a day. Archaeological digs of Victorian homes have unearthed fragments of these chamber pots, ceramic bowls, decorated with floral motifs, or even political cartoons, a strange mix of utility and culture. Diaries and letters provide a more intimate window. A lady traveling by carriage in the 1860 seconds wrote of her discomfort on the road, with gentlemen stepping easily aside while we ladies must contrive in silence. Another account describes a maid carrying a small pot in a wicker basket for her mistress's use during long journeys. These were not scandalous confessions, they were quiet acknowledgments of daily reality, tucked between more proper observations. Medical notes also leave hints. Doctors sometimes recorded cases of women fainting, not only from corsets but from what they delicately described as urinary retention. At crowded balls or church services, holding back for hours could cause physical distress. Such slips into the medical record confirm what etiquette books ignored. Silence often came at the cost of health. There is also evidence of split-crotch drawers, the infamous undergarments, often mocked in modern retellings. Surviving examples in textile collections reveal that these garments did exist, with two pant legs joined at the waist but open between the thighs. Their purpose was not erotic, as some later imagined, but practical. A woman could lower herself over a chamber pot without lifting all her skirts. Combined with oval-shaped pots designed to fit snugly between the thighs, this made the process possible if still awkward. Travel writing adds another layer. European and American visitors alike remarked on the impracticality of English women's crinolines, often with a mix of fascination and scorn. Some described retiring rooms in theaters and ballrooms where maids stood ready with pots. Others exaggerated wildly, but beneath the mockery is a kernel of truth. Special spaces did exist, attended by servants, precisely because women needed assistance. Finally, we find evidence in the campaigns of sanitary reformers. Reports from the Metropolitan Sanitary Commission in the mid-1800 seconds note the absence of facilities for women in public spaces. While men enjoyed an expanding network of public urinals, women were left with nothing. Reformers argued that this exclusion confined women to their homes and limited their independence. To build toilets for women, they insisted, was not just a matter of comfort, but of equality. Taken together, these fragments form a mosaic of reality. No, women did not regularly urinate on ballroom floors, as the cartoons suggested. But yes, they used portable urinals. Yes, they wore open crotch drawers to make chamber pots accessible. Yes, ornate commode chairs sat quietly in drawing rooms. And yes, countless women endured the pain of silence in public spaces without any recourse at all. The evidence strips away some of the comedy, but leaves us with something more poignant. A glimpse of ordinary women navigating impossible expectations, balancing elegance with biology, forced to improvise within the constraints of fashion and morality. And yet, even the best evidence cannot capture the strangeness of lived experience. Behind the patens and pots were real moments, accidents, humiliations, whispered improvisations that rarely made it into the written record. To glimpse those, we must turn to the world of anecdote and phenomenon, the lived realities that left no patent drawings but linger in memory. Patents, diaries, and commode chairs give us proof. But the lived reality of Victorian women, those unspeakable, awkward, often humiliating moments, remains harder to pin down. Here, we step into the realm of anecdotes and strange phenomena, the improvisations that rarely made the official record, but echo through memoirs, servants' notes, and whispered tales. One of the strangest paradoxes of the crinoline was that it could act as both prison and disguise. Diaries of ladies' maids describe moments on long train journeys when their mistresses had no choice but to squat in a corner of the carriage. The skirts, hoops spread wide, created a kind of fabric tent. From the outside, nothing could be seen. From the inside, the reality was far less dignified. Whether this was a rare emergency or a practiced trick, it shows how women adapted in ways society never acknowledged. At social events, fainting rooms offered another curious solution. Officially, these small side rooms were for recovering from corset-induced swoons. Unofficially, some doubled as spaces where maids discreetly positioned chamber pots. In gossip passed among servants, certain fainting couches were known to conceal hidden pots beneath their cushions. What looked like genteel fragility, a lady collapsing gracefully into velvet, was sometimes cover for something far more practical. Travel, always a challenge, inspired its own improvisations. Some garments in museum collections feature curious slits or panels stitched into the back, possibly designed to allow easier relief, without removing every layer. Historians debate whether these were deliberate rest gowns or later alterations. But the very existence of such clothing keeps alive the question: were women forced to plan their wardrobes not just for elegance, but for survival? Then there are the accounts of accidents. Newspapers occasionally reported on women fainting at balls, the cause attributed not only to corsets but to the agony of holding themselves for hours. Servants whispered of carriages that returned from journeys with suspicious stains on their floors. In one widely circulated anecdote, a lady was said to have toppled in her crinoline during a country outing, only for onlookers to discover the secret chamber pot strapped beneath her skirts. True or embellished, such tales reveal society's fascination with the thin line between dignity and disaster. Menstruation added another layer of unspoken difficulty. Cloth rags, moss, or wool stuffed into undergarments were washed and reused endlessly. Without elastic or disposable products, leaks and stains were inevitable. Yet women were expected to endure in silence. Servants' notes mention extra laundry, discreetly explained away as household linens. Even here, secrecy shrouded reality. Public life magnified the challenge. At exhibitions, races, or royal parades, where crowds surged and toilets were non-existent, women often relied on gardens, alleyways, or hastily improvised spaces. In Paris, there are scattered references to women using urinettes in theater boxes, their skirts acting as cover. In London, reformers pointed to such humiliations as proof of the urgent need for women's public facilities. Perhaps most haunting are the stories of danger. Crinolines caught fire when women leaned too close to candles or fireplaces. Some accidents proved fatal, skirts burning so quickly that escape was impossible. In such tragedies, the body's vulnerability was laid bare not only to fire, but to the inescapable restrictions of fashion. These disasters were reported widely, but always framed as accidents of vanity rather than symptoms of a system that prioritized elegance over safety. What ties these phenomena together is the silence surrounding them. Official records are scarce, not because such struggles did not exist, but because they were never meant to be spoken of. Respectable women were expected to hide their discomfort, and respectable men were expected to ignore it. The result was a society where reality slipped out only through accidents, rumors, and the whispers of servants. And yet, even in the silence, we glimpse resilience. Women endured, adapted, and sometimes even found humor in their circumstances. A satirical letter published anonymously in the 1870 seconds mocked the absurdity of wearing a tent about the hips while having no place to relieve oneself in public. Beneath the sarcasm was a quiet act of rebellion, breaking the silence by naming the problem. These strange, often unbelievable phenomena remind us that the Victorians were not marble statues or oil paintings. They were human, struggling daily with the same needs we face, made infinitely harder by fashion and silence. But the story does not end with the 19th century. These struggles shaped reforms, influenced architecture, and left traces in modern life. To see how the hidden realities of Victorian women echo into our own world, we must look at their legacy. The story of how Victorian women relieved themselves beneath layers of steel and silk might feel like a curious relic of the past, but its legacy lingers, shaping architecture, public policy, and even the way we talk about bodies today. One of the clearest legacies is the rise of the public ladies' restroom. For much of the 19th century, women had no equivalent to the public urinals available for men. Reformers argued that this was not just an inconvenience, but a form of control. If women had nowhere to relieve themselves, they were less likely to travel freely in public. By the late Victorian era, pressure from sanitary campaigners led to the construction of the first public conveniences for women in London, New York, and Paris. These facilities symbolized more than plumbing. They represented women's gradual claim to public space. Architecture also carried forward the lessons of the crinoline. The idea of the ladies' retiring room, or powder room, lavishly decorated spaces with couches and mirrors, was a direct descendant of fainting rooms and commode chambers. These rooms became fixtures in theaters, hotels, and department stores, signaling that women deserved both privacy and comfort in public life. Even today, the design of women's restrooms with more stalls, mirrors, and sometimes lounges echoes that Victorian inheritance. Fashion, too, adjusted. The collapse of the hoop skirt in favor of the bustle during the 1870 seconds reflected not only changing tastes, but also a recognition of impracticality. Dresses became narrower, slightly easier to manage, and less hazardous. The extreme silhouette of the crinoline never returned, but its memory lives on in wedding gowns and haute couture garments that still flirt with excess, even as modern plumbing removes their worst discomforts. Culturally, the fascination persists. Museums mount exhibitions on daily life in the Victorian home, often displaying chamber pots, split drawers, and sanitary aids alongside gowns and jewelry. These objects remind visitors that beneath elegance lay sweat, odor, and struggle. Period dramas and novels occasionally hint at the absurdity: skirts catching fire, women fainting but rarely confront the raw details of menstruation or sanitation. In this way, the Victorian silence still echoes. For feminists, however, the silence itself has become part of the story. Historians argue that denying women's bodily needs was a form of social control, reinforcing the belief that proper ladies should remain indoors, bound to the private sphere. Modern discussions of toilet equity, the fight for adequate restroom facilities for women, and for marginalized groups trace their lineage back to these Victorian struggles. What was once an unspoken inconvenience has become a recognized political issue. Even language carries traces of the past. Phrases like, "don't have a pot to piss in," or "powdering one's nose," are linguistic fossils of a time when bodily functions were hidden behind euphemism. To this day, we often cloak natural needs in polite code, echoing Victorian discomfort. Perhaps most importantly, the story serves as a reminder. It warns us that when appearances are prized above reality, it is often women's bodies that bear the cost. The Victorians built gowns that dazzled the eye and silenced the body. Today, we face different pressures: beauty standards, workplace expectations, social media perfection, but the tension between image and reality remains. The legacy of the crinoline, then, is not just about steel hoops and chamber pots. It is about the ongoing struggle to reconcile dignity with biology, public life with private need. And it asks us to consider, in what ways are we still repeating the same patterns, dressing discomfort in elegance, hiding reality beneath silence? To answer that, we turn to the final reflection. Beneath the chandeliers, behind the portraits, under the layers of silk and steel, there was always another story. The story of women who smiled for society while enduring silence, who floated like angels across ballrooms even as they struggled with chamber pots, rags, or whispered improvisations hidden beneath their skirts. The Victorians left us countless images of elegance, but they left almost nothing about the indignities that came with it. That absence speaks volumes. It tells us that what was considered shameful was erased, even though it was central to daily life. The rumors and cartoons we explored, the jokes about urinating in crinolines, the whispers of crotchless drawers, the exaggerated caricatures were not simply comedy. They were cracks in the silence, small hints of the truth no one dared to say outright. What survives patents, commode chairs, diaries, fragments of clothing is enough to remind us these were real women with real bodies, forced to navigate an impossible contradiction. To be graceful and silent, yet human and needy. To carry the weight of fashion and the weight of secrecy together. And maybe that is the real legacy of this hidden history. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions, not just about the Victorians, but about ourselves. In what ways do we still demand silence about the body? How often do we prize appearance over reality, elegance over comfort, image over truth? The next time you see a portrait of a Victorian lady, corseted and serene, imagine the unseen. The corset biting into her ribs, the steel cage pressing at her hips, the quiet endurance of her body's needs, unspoken, unrecorded, but always present. Because history is not only about kings and queens, wars and empires. It is also about the quiet struggles of ordinary people, the indignities we rarely write down, but which shape how we live. And when we recover those hidden truths, we bring the past closer, more human, more haunting. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the Victorians' obsession with elegance justified the daily suffering it caused? Or was fashion simply another way society controlled women's bodies? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this glimpse behind the lace and velvet revealing, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to Hidden History Vault, where we uncover the untold, the tragic, and the mysterious past. Because sometimes, the most shocking truths are not written in history books. They are hidden beneath silence, waiting to be uncovered.